Brandon Pierce didn't expect to tackle a masked man in a grocery store parking lot that Tuesday night, but then again, most things in his life lately had been unexpected. "Stay behind me," he told the woman as the guy lunged toward her purse, knife glinting under the flickering street lamp. Brandon didn't hesitate. He shoved the man backward, sending him crashing into a cart corral. The thief took one look at Brandon's wide stance and clenched fists before scrambling to his feet and bolting into the darkness. The woman stared at Brandon like he'd just walked out of a movie. "Are you okay?" he asked, breathing hard. "Did he hurt you?" She looked stunned, her voice catching. "No, thank you." Brandon rubbed the back of his neck, only now noticing the stinging scrape on his forearm. "It's nothing, just glad I got here in time." She stepped closer and held out her hand. "Kiera Callahan." He shook it, noticing how her fingers trembled despite the calm in her voice. "Brandon Pierce, was just picking up mac and cheese for my kid." Kiera's eyes softened. "You have a child?" "Yeah, and my daughter Maddie. She's 7. Smart as a whip, way too into space stuff, and absolutely convinced she'll be an astronaut by 10. Kiera smiled, really smiled this time, and it lit up her whole face. "She sounds amazing." "She is," he exhaled, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "Listen, do you want me to walk you to your car, just in case he's still lurking?" "I'd really like that," she said. They walked side by side, and he noticed the way she kept glancing at him, like she was trying to figure something out. Her car was a sleek black Audi, gleaming even under the weak lights. "Nice ride," he said with a whistle. Kiera hesitated, then gave a small laugh. "It gets me where I need to go." Brandon didn't press. He knew when people didn't want to talk about money, and it wasn't like he had any to compare. His truck was 15 years old and held together by optimism and duct tape. After checking around her car, he opened the door for her. "Really?" she said, pausing before getting in. "Thank you, you didn't have to jump in like that." He shrugged. "You looked scared. I couldn't just walk away from that." She looked at him for a long beat. "Can I buy you dinner?" "What?" "I mean it, as a thank you. You saved me." Brandon hesitated. He hadn't been on a real date since Maddie's mom walked out 3 years ago, and this woman, she was polished, confident, way out of his league. But she looked so genuine. Sure," he said. "Yeah, that'd be nice." "Tomorrow night." He smiled. "You're not worried I might be some dangerous guy?" "You tackled someone for me. I think that earns you a little trust." He laughed. "Fair point." She handed him a business card, just her name and number. Simple, elegant. "I'll text you the place," she said. 7. 7 works. I'll find a babysitter." She slid into the car, and he watched it glide out of the lot, wondering what just happened. The next night, Brandon stood in front of his mirror, tugging at the one button-down shirt he owned that wasn't stained or fraying. Maddie watched from the bed, legs swinging. "Are you going on a date?" "I guess I am," he said, tying his shoes. "Is she pretty?" He paused. "Yeah, she is." "Do you like her?" "I don't know yet, but she's nice." Maddie tilted her head. "Are you gonna kiss her?" Brandon laughed. "Okay, can we not jump ahead?" She giggled. "I hope she's nice to you." "Me too, kiddo." He dropped her off with his neighbor Mrs. Tully, a sweet retired teacher who adored Maddie, then drove across town to the address Kiera sent. His jaw dropped when he pulled up. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a private rooftop dining experience above one of the city's most exclusive hotels. A valet opened his truck door, and Brandon suddenly felt very out of place. But when he stepped out onto the rooftop, Kiera was already their hair swept back, wearing a simple navy dress that still somehow made her look like royalty. You came, she said, smiling. Brandon scratched the back of his neck. Didn't realize I needed a tux. She laughed. You look great. He sat across from her at a candlelit table set with real silverware and crystal glasses. A string quartet played softly in the background. This is something, he admitted. I wanted to thank you properly. He picked up the menu and nearly choked. One appetizer cost more than his electric bill. Kiera noticed. Hey, order whatever you want, my treat. He looked at her. This is a little more than dinner, you sure? She nodded, I'm sure. Over dinner, they talked and talked. About everything: her love for books, his job as a mechanic, her childhood in Connecticut, his dreams for Maddie. She didn't pry about his struggles, and he didn't ask how she could afford a meal like this. But something clicked, the way she listened, the way her eyes lit up when he made her laugh, the way his chest felt lighter when she smiled at him. When he walked her to a private elevator after dinner, she paused before getting in. I had a really great time, she said softly. Yes, he replied, me too. She leaned up and kissed his cheek. I'll call you. And then she was gone. Brandon walked back to his truck with a strange flutter in his stomach. He had no idea who she really was. And Kiera, sitting in the back seat of a chauffeured car with city lights blurring past the window, felt something she hadn't felt in years. She was falling, and fast. Brandon's boots thudded against the concrete floor of the garage as he rolled out from under a sedan, grease streaked across his forearm. The morning after the rooftop dinner, every moment with Kiera still played on a loop in his mind. He hadn't expected her to call, but she had early, direct, and with a calm confidence that left him standing in his kitchen blinking at the phone like it had grown legs. She wanted to see him again. Tonight. Earth to Brandon, came a voice from above. He looked up to see Miguel, his coworker, peering down at him with a raised brow. You're grinning like someone just told you we're getting raises. Brandon wiped his hands on a rag. Just had a good night, that's all. Miguel narrowed his eyes. You get laid or win the lottery. Brandon shook his head, chuckling. Neither, just met someone. Miguel let out a low whistle. That explains it. Hope she's not crazy. She's different, Brandon said, surprising himself with how certain he felt. And I don't mean in a bad way. Different like what? She into crystals or something? Brandon laughed. No, just grounded, smart, she listens. Miguel leaned against the workbench. You bringing her around here? Brandon hesitated. Not yet, it's early. He didn't say what he was really thinking. That he wasn't sure how someone like Kiera would react to the smell of motor oil and rusted toolboxes. Or how she'd fit into the world he'd built for Maddie, the one patched together with second-hand furniture and late-night grocery runs. By 6:30, he was back at his place, rinsing off under a too-cold shower while Maddie quizzed him from the other side of the bathroom door about whether or not Kiera liked dogs, because Mrs. Tully had one and it barked a lot, and that might scare her. Brandon shook his head, laughing under the spray. He dropped Maddie off again with Mrs. Tully, who gave him a once-over like she was inspecting a tuxedoed secret agent. You clean up nice, even without the hair gel. Thanks, I think, he said. Kiera met him by the waterfront, standing near a small marina, the setting sun casting gold across the bay. She wore a soft cream coat, her hair caught in the breeze. She didn't wave, just smiled when she saw him, like she'd been waiting all day. You didn't tell me we'd be by the water, he said as he joined her. I like surprises, she answered, gesturing toward the docked sailboat behind her. Brandon blinked. We're going out on that. She nodded. It's mine. Keep it here when I'm in the city. He looked from her to the sleek lines of the vessel. You sail. She stepped aboard first, then offered him her hand. I grew up around boats. It's the one thing that still makes me feel like I can breathe. He took her hand, letting her pull him up. I've never done this before. Then I'll go easy on you. As they pulled out into the calm harbor, Brandon sat back, watching her hands move with practiced ease over the ropes and wheel. She looked different here, more relaxed, like the tension she carried on land peeled away with every gust of sea air. I never saw you as the sailing type, he said. That's because you don't know me yet. He watched her, the set of her jaw as she adjusted the sails, the way her eyes tracked the horizon like it was familiar ground. That's true. She glanced at him, something flickering across her face. I'm not used to people not knowing. He tilted his head, not knowing what. She hesitated, who I am or what I do. Brandon leaned back, letting the wind ruffle his shirt. You don't have to tell me. Kiera looked out at the water. I run a consultancy. High-end mergers and acquisitions, mostly international. I'm not famous, just in circles where people tend to recognize the last name. He didn't ask what those circles were, or what her last name meant. Instead, he said, you don't seem like someone who cares about that stuff. I don't, but it's always there, like a shadow. The sail flapped, and she adjusted it without breaking her gaze from the skyline. I don't bring people here, not unless I trust them. Brandon laughed softly. I'm not sure what I did to earn that. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't even blink when I handed you a menu that could have paid your rent. He shrugged. I figure if someone's trying that hard to show off, they probably don't have much else going for them. She looked at him then, really looked. Exactly. They drifted in silence for a while, the sound of the water lapping against the hull the only thing between them. The city lights began to flicker on in the distance. Brandon broke the quiet. You ever think about walking away from all of it? All the time, she said, but I built it. Every deal, every company I saved, every boardroom I walked into underprepared and still came out on top. I don't want to leave it. I just want it to stop defining me. He nodded. Sometimes I feel like I've been stuck in the same place for years. Like the more I try to get ahead, the more I just stay afloat. You're raising a child alone. That's not staying afloat. That's surviving with grace. Something in her voice made him look up. Brandon, she said, I didn't expect to meet someone like you, not in a million years, and I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out. He reached across the space between them and covered her hand with his. I want that too. The boat rocked gently beneath them, and for the first time in a long time, Brandon felt like the ground beneath him was steady. Neither of them noticed the dark SUV parked near the dock, or the man inside watching the boat drift across the water with narrowed eyes. Brandon stood frozen in the doorway of the suite, blinking against the sudden shift in atmosphere. The hotel wasn't just upscale, it reeked of legacy, with polished black marble floors, hand-painted ceilings, and a concierge who greeted Kiera by name without hesitation. She hadn't planned to bring him here. He could tell by the way she glanced at him when the elevator doors closed, her fingers tightening around her clutch for a second too long. I had a meeting upstairs, she said as they stepped into the penthouse. Didn't want to reschedule. The room overlooked the city like it owned it. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across a skyline that twinkled like glass diamonds. A few files sat open on the coffee table. No clutter, no signs of anyone really living here, just the sort of curated luxury Brandon had only ever seen in movies. He didn't sit. Instead, he wandered toward the window, hands in his pockets, his gaze tracing the edge of the skyline. This is where you work. Sometimes, she said from behind him. Keep places in a few cities. This one's mostly for when I'm meeting clients in person. Right, he said, nodding once. Brandon, her voice softened, I didn't bring you here to impress you. He turned, meeting her eyes. Then why did you? She hesitated. Because I didn't want to lie, not by omission. I can't ask you to trust me if I start this off pretending I live a different life than I do. I'm not asking you to pretend, he said. I just didn't expect you to be this far out of my world. You're not out of mind. He stepped forward. Kiera, I fix carburetors, I budget grocery trips, I don't own a suit, and you. You saved me, she cut in. Not because of what I could offer you, not because I looked like someone you could use. You did it without hesitation. That means more to me than any title or bank account. He searched her face. You're not scared that this will get complicated? She gave a faint smile. Everything worth it usually does. He let out a breath. I'm not good at complicated. I am. That pulled a laugh from him, a real one. That, I believe. There was a knock on the door. Kiera moved to answer it without hesitation, revealing a sharply dressed woman in her 40s holding a leather folder and a tablet. She handed both over with a clipped nod before disappearing down the hallway. Kiera dropped the folder on the table, then paused. That was my assistant. I told her to send over the documents I'd been reviewing. Brandon raised an eyebrow. You always work this late. Only when it matters. She crossed to the table, flipping through the pages. There's a deal closing tomorrow. A company I've been trying to bring under my firm's umbrella for over a year. He moved beside her. You think they'll go for it? I already know they will. She looked up. But it's not the win I care about anymore. Her voice wasn't boastful. It held something else, weariness, maybe, or clarity. What do you care about then? I think I'm starting to figure that out. There was a long silence between them, not awkward but heavy, like both of them could sense the shift happening beneath their feet. Brandon finally asked, So where does this go, Kiera, you and me? She didn't look away. That depends on whether you're willing to let someone in who doesn't come from the same place you do. I don't care where you come from, he said. I care whether you're someone I can count on, someone my daughter can count on. Kiera's eyes softened. You don't know how much that means to me. He stepped closer. I meant what I said on the boat. I want to find out what this could be, but I can't play games. I've got a little girl at home who's my entire world. If this goes somewhere, it has to be real. She nodded, her voice steady. Then let's make it real. That night he didn't stay. She didn't ask. They stood at the elevator, close but not touching, the air between them charged with something unspoken. As the doors opened, she reached out, brushing her fingers just barely against his. You're not what I expected. He gave a quiet smile. Neither are you. He left her standing there, the city glowing behind her like a promise. The next morning, Brandon was back at the garage when the call came in, his landlord. The building had been sold. Rent was going up, way up. He hung up, jaw clenched. Maddie's room already had a leaky ceiling and a window that didn't shut properly. There was no way he could swing another few hundred a month, not without dropping something else. Miguel walked in, tossing his keys on the counter. You all right? Brandon shook his head. Rent's jumping, might have to move. Miguel frowned. Where would you even go? He didn't have an answer. Later that night, he picked Maddie up from Mrs. Tully's and tried to keep his face neutral as she babbled about a new science book, but she caught on fast. You look upset. He forced a smile. Just a long day. Is it the truck again? No, baby, it's not the truck. She reached over and squeezed his hand, small fingers wrapping around his calloused ones. You'll figure it out. You always do. Kiera called just after he put Maddie to bed. He answered on the third ring. You okay? She asked immediately. Not really, but I will be. She was quiet for a moment. Tell me what's going on. He hesitated, but then told her. Not everything, but enough. The rent, the pressure, how he couldn't keep stretching himself thinner without something breaking. She didn't offer money, she didn't make promises. Instead, she said, I know a place. Small house, quiet street, good schools, it's sitting empty. I bought it years ago, thinking I might move there someday, but never did. Don't, he said quickly, don't offer me charity. I'm offering you space. A chance, you still pay rent, you still manage the place, but it buys you time. Brandon ran a hand down his face. I don't know. You said you wanted real. This is me being real. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, let me think about it. She didn't push, okay. But something cracked open between them that night, not because of the offer, but because she trusted him enough to make it. And because for the first time in a long time, Brandon realized he didn't have to carry it all alone. Neither of them noticed the same dark SUV parked across from his building. The man inside finished a phone call, lips pressed into a thin line. He'd finally figured out who Brandon Pierce was. And he wasn't going to let Kiera Callahan fall for him without a fight. Rain lashed against the windshield as Brandon pulled up outside the house Kiera had mentioned. It was modest by her standards, but still nicer than anywhere he'd ever lived. Whitewashed brick, blue shutters, and a swing hanging from the front porch like it belonged in a painting. He hadn't said yes right away. In fact, he'd spent 3 straight nights thinking of reasons to say no. But with Maddie's lease ending in 4 weeks and no backup plan in sight, pride had to take a backseat to practicality. He knocked once before pushing the door open. Kiera stood inside, barefoot, her blazer tossed over a chair and sleeves rolled to her elbows. The place smelled like fresh paint and rain-damp wood. I wasn't sure if you'd come, she said, her voice steady but softer than usual. I wasn't sure either, Brandon admitted, stepping inside. Didn't want to owe you something I couldn't repay. You don't owe me anything. This is a lease, not charity. He nodded, scanning the living room. You really never lived here. No, I bought it after my mother passed. Thought I might settle down someday, but I never quite figured out what that meant. Brandon turned to her, and now? I think I'm starting to understand. A silence passed between them before she opened a drawer and pulled out a single key, setting it on the counter. It's yours, whenever you're ready. Brandon picked it up, the weight of it heavier than he expected. Maddie's going to love the porch. She'll have space and a real backyard, that's something. He slipped the key into his coat. I appreciate it, Kiera, I really do. Her expression gentled. You never asked me why I was in that parking lot the night we met. He leaned against the doorframe. Figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. She crossed the room and sat on the arm of the couch, her fingers nodding slightly in her lap. I just walked out of a meeting with my father's estate lawyer. I was angry, not because of the money, because of what it made people become. Brandon's brow furrowed. What do you mean? They're trying to sell off everything he left. The company, the stock, the land, all of it, and I'm the only one standing in the way. They think I'm being sentimental, but I'm trying to protect what he built. You're not sentimental, Brandon said. You're holding the memory together after everyone else gave up. She looked at him, surprised. That's exactly it. He walked toward her, stopping just close enough to feel the shift in the air. What happens if you lose? I won't. I've put everything into this. If I let them gut it, then it all meant nothing. He nodded. You're not the type to give up. No, she said, but lately, I've started wondering what I'm fighting for, the legacy or the control. Brandon's voice lowered. Maybe it's time to choose something that doesn't ask you to fight at all. She reached for his hand without hesitation, their fingers meeting like puzzle pieces. I'm tired, Brandon. I know, he said, me too. The doorbell rang. He glanced toward it, brows pulling together. You expecting someone? She shook her head. He opened it cautiously, and standing there was a man in a suit too polished for the neighborhood. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a watch that cost more than Brandon's truck. His eyes flicked from Brandon to Kiera. I'm looking for Ms. Callahan. Kiera stepped forward, her hand tightening slightly around Brandon's. Uncle Martin. Brandon's gut twisted. The surname clicked into place. Martin Callahan, CEO of Callahan Capital, the same man who'd been trying to dismantle her father's empire. You've been ignoring my calls, Martin said, stepping in uninvited. So decided to come in person. Brandon didn't move from the doorway. She's not alone. I can see that. Martin's gaze drifted over him with open disapproval. This must be the mechanic. Kiera's expression didn't flinch. What do you want? Martin glanced around the house like it offended him. Your board vote is in 2 days. You're the final holdout. We need your shares to get the sale through. You're not getting them, she said flatly. You're letting sentiment cloud business. I'm protecting what he created, and I don't need your approval to do it. Martin's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Kiera stepped forward. No, I made mistakes for years thinking I had to be like you, but I don't and I won't. Martin's eyes flicked to Brandon one last time before he turned. When this all falls apart, don't say, didn't warn you. Brandon closed the door behind him. Kiera let out a long breath. He's never liked me challenging him. Brandon touched her shoulder. He saw someone he couldn't control. That scares men like him. She looked up at him, something raw in her eyes. I feel like everything's unraveling. It's not, he said quietly. It's just changing. The next morning, Kiera stood at the front of the Callahan Capital boardroom with her back straight and voice clear. Brandon didn't see it firsthand, but he heard about it from a client who stopped by the garage later that week, how she dismantled the proposal line by line, how she refused the buyout, how she announced plans to restructure the company under a new charter, one that protected legacy projects and employee equity. She didn't just win the vote. She pulled the entire board behind her. Brandon found her that evening at the new house, sitting on the porch swing with her heels off and her phone tossed in the grass. Maddie was inside with a coloring book, humming to herself. You did it, he said. Kiera looked up. I didn't do it alone. He sat beside her. You ever think maybe this, he gestured to the porch, the house, the quiet, was what you were supposed to be building all along? I think I needed to lose the noise to hear it. Maddie leaned out the screen door. Dad, can we keep the swing forever? Brandon smiled. Yes, baby, we're not going anywhere. Kiera reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. Neither am I. The porch light flicked on as the sun dipped low, casting golden shadows against the siding. And for the first time in years, they weren't running toward something or away from it. They were standing still. Together. You're not nervous? Brandon asked as he adjusted the collar of his dress shirt, glancing sideways at Kiera as she fastened a delicate bracelet around her wrist. She met his gaze in the mirror, her reflection calm but unreadable. Not about tonight. He watched her for a moment longer, taking in the graceful way she moved, measured, deliberate, like someone used to walking into rooms where she didn't know whether she'd be welcomed or challenged. But there was something different about her now, something softer around the edges. They were getting ready for the community fundraiser at Maddie's school, a modest affair at the local library that Kiera had offered to sponsor without a trace of hesitation. She hadn't just written a check. She'd helped design the new reading corner, picked out the furniture herself, and even brought in a children's author to speak. Brandon had watched her charm every teacher and parent on the planning committee without ever making them feel like she was doing them a favor. He hadn't said it out loud, but he was proud of her. You sure you want to do this? He asked, pulling on his jacket. It's not exactly your usual crowd. Kiera turned to face him and smoothed the lapels of his coat. That's the point. This is where I want to be. He kissed her forehead, letting his hand rest briefly at her waist. Then let's go. The school was buzzing when they arrived. Maddie spotted them first, running across the gymnasium in a blur of excitement, dressed in a glittery headband and a pink dress that bounced with every step. Dad, Kiera, come see the mural. She grabbed their hands and tugged them toward the far wall, where a new painting had gone up, a colorful scene of storybook characters leaping from the pages of open books. Beneath it, in small letters, was written, "For the dreamers, the builders, and the quiet heroes." Brandon leaned down. You helped with this. Maddie nodded fiercely, picked the dragon, and Kiera said we needed a moon, so we added that too. Kiera knelt beside her. Every story needs a little magic. Principal Ellis approached them with a warm smile and extended a hand to Kiera. You've made a lot of children very happy today. Thank you. Kiera shook his hand, her voice clear. We're just getting started. They moved through the event together, greeting parents, helping serve cupcakes, and sitting through a surprisingly emotional student poetry reading. Brandon couldn't help noticing how easily Kiera fit into it all now. She wasn't performing. She wasn't calculating. She was present. Later that night, back at the house, Maddie fell asleep curled up on the couch with a book still open on her chest. Brandon carried her to bed, tucking her in beneath the quilt Kiera had found at a local market, the one with little embroidered stars. When he returned to the living room, Kiera was standing at the window, arms folded, watching the rain slide down the glass. He walked over and wrapped his arms around her from behind. You've been quiet. I've been thinking, she said, about how different this could have all been if I hadn't gone to the store that night, if I'd taken a different street or left 5 minutes earlier. He rested his chin on her shoulder. I think about that too. She turned in his arms, her eyes searching his. I never expected to find this, not just you, but this life. Maddie, the quiet, the laughter, the way it feels like I can just breathe. I didn't think I'd ever trust someone again, he admitted. Not like this. She cupped his face with both hands. I love you. He didn't hesitate. I love you. They kissed, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that said everything words never could. And when they pulled apart, there was no more doubt, no more waiting. Only the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. 3 months later, the backyard bloomed with late summer roses and the sound of laughter. Friends and neighbors filled the space, gathered beneath strings of lights and white paper lanterns. Maddie wore a flower crown and passed out lemonade from a small table decorated with glittery signs. Kiera stood barefoot in the grass, a simple ivory dress clinging to her like it had been made just for her. Brandon stood at her side, holding her hand as they exchanged vows. There was no chapel, no crowds of executives or photographers. Just the people who mattered, the ones who had seen them grow, struggle, and fight their way to this moment. Miguel officiated, grinning like he was witnessing a miracle. I now pronounce you husband and wife, he said. You may kiss her before Maddie does. They laughed, and Brandon pulled Kiera into a kiss that drew cheers from the crowd and a delighted squeal from Maddie, who immediately launched herself into their arms. That night, after the last guest had gone and the lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, Brandon carried Kiera over the threshold of their home. Not a penthouse, not a hotel suite, but the house they built together brick by brick, memory by memory. He set her down in the hallway, their laughter echoing softly. Mrs. Pierce, he said, brushing her hair from her face. She smiled, eyes shining. That sounds perfect. They didn't need fireworks or helicopters or champagne towers. They had everything they needed right there: a shared life, a second chance, and a love that had weathered every storm. And as Maddie slept upstairs, curled up with a stuffed astronaut and a heart full of certainty, her parents held each other beneath the quiet glow of their porch light, fully and finally home.